Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, your host. I'm also the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine. Our guest today is the very accomplished Dean of the California School of Podiatric Medicine, Dr. Eric Stamps. Dr. Stamps received his Doctor of Podiatric Medicine degree with honors from the California College of Podiatric Medicine in 1993. He finished his podiatric surgical residency at the Kaiser Foundation Hospital and began his academic career in podiatry back in 1996 at the California School of Podiatric Medicine at Samuel Merritt University. He has been the dean at the California School since 2018. Dr. Stamps is board certified by the American Board of Podiatric Medicine. In addition to musculoskeletal imaging of the foot and ankle, his professional interests include clinical reasoning and prevention of diabetic foot problems. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Stamps.
Dr. Jensen, thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. So that was a very nice introduction. I wouldn't say I'm very accomplished, but thank you anyway.
I think you are, and we'll show that over the course of the next half hour or so. So in keeping with the fireside chat theme, I'd like to keep it more informal, and going forward, you be Eric and I'm Jeff. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me. That's how I like it.
All right. So Eric, I'm really interested in your podiatric journey that started in 1996 back at the California College of Podiatric Medicine, and really has stemmed, 20 plus years, 24, 25 years. And now you're the dean at the college, and that's my alma mater. So tell me about that journey. What was it like finishing residency and starting your academic career?
Yeah, my journey might be a little different from everybody else's. I'm sure we're all a little bit different. But for me, once I finished residency, I started private practice. And I started the day after residency. I think we ended June 30th, and that weekend was 4th of July weekend. So right after that, I started private practice. Well, that was July. In, I think it was October, I injured my back at a dance doing the chicken polka.
Oh.
And then I felt this hot poker in my back. And I was like, I got to go home. It was the end of the evening anyway. So I went home. And anyway, long story short, I had ruptured a disc and I wasn't able to plantar flex on my right side. And so I ended up going to see a neurosurgeon. And he said to me, "When was the last time you ate?" And I went, it looks like I'm having surgery. I had surgery that night. And I felt better than ever. I mean, I felt great, but he said, you can't drive for a couple of weeks. I don't want you working for a couple months. I went, but I just started. It's like, so anyway, I get back to work 2 months later and things are really slow. So I was like, what could I do? So I said, I was I'm in the Bay Area, north of San Francisco. And I thought, I'm going to go volunteer at the school. So I volunteered for what was at the time they called their general podiatry clinic, GPC. And it was just a half day a week or maybe 2 half days a week, but at least it gave me something to do while I started to rebuild my practice. Well, I love teaching. I didn't realize I love it so much. And after 4 or 5 months of just volunteering there in the clinic and, really getting to see how things work as a faculty member, one of the faculty announced the retirement, and the chair of the Department of Podiatric Medicine, it was Jim Stavosky, Dr. Stavosky, asked me if I'd be interested in applying for the job. And I said, sure. And I did. And I got the position, and here I am. No, so it was one of those things where it's sort of the frog in the cold water story, where they're gradually turning up the heat. So I started just by working in the clinic, and then they asked me if I want to do my first lecture, and of course I was scared. Like, lecture? Okay, I'll try one, and that went well. And then another one, and then they give you a class to teach, and it's like, wow, okay. And as you know, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, the school underwent a tremendous transformation when they sold the property in the Western Addition, and they contracted their faculty. And for somehow I survived that contracture, but I was left kind of running almost my whole department. there were very few other people to lecture. So I just started teaching as much as I could possibly teach, with the idea is I wanted to preserve the education, the great education that we had on Scott Street. It was such a great education. I didn't want to lose any of it. So that's where things really accelerated for me.
So back then, when we were at school at California at the same time, and I graduated in 91, you graduated in 93. It was just such an incredible experience, the different modules for surgery and biomechanics, and it was just an unbelievable experience. And so your goal was to maintain that through the transitions.
Absolutely. It was the best educational experience of my life. My high water mark before that was junior high, Reedland Woods Junior High in Tiburon, California. It was a great experience for me. But this I thought was even better. And I just didn't want to lose any of that. It was kind of Camelot of education. I had just learned so much and thrived at Scott Street.
Absolutely. And I was the same way. And I felt like all of our classmates, when we would go and extern around the country and we'd all talk about where we were going to go do our residency, everybody was shining and getting top residency programs. It was a special time for the California College for sure.
It certainly was. Yeah.
So when you went from running a department, what was the path then? So you moved over to Samuel Merritt after a little stint up at Toro, right?
Right. Yeah. We were up in Vallejo. And then in July of 2002, we merged with Samuel Merritt College
right
at the time, which was a big transition for us, but it was a lifesaver. We landed well. They're a great institution. And somewhere during that time, the dean, Dr. Albert Burns, asked me if I wanted to be the assistant dean for clinical affairs, running the clinics.
Right.
And I'm one who, I don't say no very often. And I said, okay, I wasn't sure what to do exactly, but I started doing that and carrying the same teaching load. So it was, and I was teaching at the time, pretty much most of the musculoskeletal imaging, of the foot and ankle, all the courses and rotations. And so I added the dean, the assistant dean for clinical affairs, because I wanted to really preserve and grow our clinical rotations, which were already excellent, but I wanted to make them even better. So I think I did that for close to 15 years.
That's fantastic. So thinking back to the days in California, who were your mentors? I mean, I'm sure we have similar mentors, but I thought who kind of paved the way for you besides Dr. Burns?
Well, there's a lot going way back. I don't know if I can call him a mentor, but I always looked at him as a role model, Dr. Jeffrey Page. I just thought he was such the kind of the ideal clinician person. He was somebody I wanted to emulate. I was like, okay, he's just, kind of that. He's calm and knowledgeable and fair. And he just, I really wanted to be like that. So he was my first, person I emulated. And in terms of, helping me along, Dr. Jim Stavosky helped me quite a bit, but really Dr. John Jensen, who was the dean from, I think, 2008 to 2017, was another person who mentored me along the way and helped me grow from, associate dean to being dean, because when he retired, they asked me if I wanted to be interim dean in 2017.
Very good.
And I reluctantly said yes. Actually, I really enjoyed being behind the scenes as an associate dean, dealing with clinics. I don't know. I always thought of myself as sort of a behind the scenes kind of a person.
Being the dean's definitely a different skill set, but let's go back 1 minute. I wanted to share a story with you. So when I was a student, Dr. Page was the dean of clinics at the California College of Podiatric Medicine. And I worked up my first patient ever with Dr. Page. And then when I was the dean in Miami, Dr. Page helped me so much. He helped me with basic sciences, restructuring our curriculum, just so giving and such a mentor for sure. And then the irony is, when I moved to Arizona, Dr. Page was retiring, and it was just, I knew that the school was in good hands. I just had to keep it on the tracks, right? Because Dr. Page was at the helm. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Page for sure.
Yeah, if he's listening, yeah. Thanks, Dr. Page.
Absolutely. And of course, Dr. Stavosky, I've worked a lot with him and Dr. Vincent also. So that's incredible. So now you're the dean, and it's a different skill set than being the director of clinical education or directing a course. Tell me about that transition. How'd that go for you?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of help, from the university. Just, oh my gosh. I think the biggest hurdle to overcome is just doing all the presentations that you have to do as dean, going out there and meet and greet and so forth. But I kind of like that, it turns out. I was a little scared, of course, in the beginning, but then I just started doing it, and it got a little more comfortable as I went along. And public speaking didn't come naturally to me. In the beginning, I was always kind of the shy, studious one. But somewhere in the back of my head, I wanted to be a stand-up comedian.
That's funny.
And I used that when I was lecturing. That was my thing. Try to make difficult subjects a little more entertaining best I can. Yeah, it didn't always work, but at least I tried.
Well, that's great. Well, they do say the two most challenging things for a human being are public speaking and raising money. So we're not alone when, people, it's an acquired skill, I think.
Yeah.
So now that you're the dean, what's your leadership style? You've got faculty working with you, and I'm sure part-time faculty and preceptors. How do you generate a student-first environment at the California school?
Well, that's a great question. And for me, it's the leadership team. I see yes, I'm the dean, but I really have a co-dean, Dr. Sherry Choate. She is our Associate Dean for Educational Affairs. And back in the day when John Jensen was dean, we also had our Associate Dean for Administrative Affairs, Irma Walker-Adame. And the four of us, I thought, were a fantastic team. Things just ran so well. And I wanted to maintain as much of that cohesiveness as possible. So I essentially run most or all decisions. I run them by Dr. Choate, get her opinion. I really value her opinion. And our other, our director of clinical education, Dr. Esther Kwan, I listen to her quite a bit. And I try to get as much input as possible. I'm definitely not a dictator type. I want opinions, good and bad. I don't want yes people around me. I want to hear criticism. I like change, sort of. No, I like change, but I value my colleagues, and I want to hear everyone's opinion, and then try to come up with a decision that makes sense.
I do the same.
And
thing.
Plus, before I interrupt, I want to keep this. The other thing is I want this to be a fun place to work. And so I try to keep it light. And,
I like that. And really in 2023, a collaborative model of leadership really is the answer, because so many people have great insights and valuable opinions. We'd be making big mistakes if we didn't put a great team around us and listen to them. So I'm the same way. Very collaborative in that regard.
Good. Yeah, I could tell.
So Eric, in another episode, we were on with Maury North, and we were talking about AACPM, and you played a leadership role there. You're currently the chair. I wanted to delve into a different area of your leadership, and that's in your role with the Council on Podiatric Medical Education. You've been the chair of the Accreditation Committee, which is just a tremendous amount of work and responsibility. How'd you get involved with CPME?
It's something that actually John Vincent suggested I do, just to see how things run and get my name out there, and so I apply. Well, I volunteered for things. I was able to get on the rewrite team for the CPME 120 document, the standards for accreditation of colleges of podiatric medicine. So I did that. I was able to get on a site visit team to one of the colleges, which I did. And then I I think the opening came up for the Accreditation Committee. So I applied for that and I got on. And meanwhile, I also applied to be on the council, the full council, but I think I was rejected 3 times until I was successful doing that. So I had to stick with it. I wanted to give it up. I was like, John, I keep applying and they keep rejecting me, but I said, I keep applying. So I did.
Perseverance is always rewarded, Eric. Perseverance is always rewarded.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been on the Accreditation Committee now for quite a while, a number of cycles. And eventually they asked if I was interested in running for chair of the Accreditation Committee, which I was, well, reluctantly I was. And the Accreditation Committee is one of several committees of the Council on Podiatric Medical Education. It's the one that is responsible for accreditation of now the 11 colleges of podiatric medicine. It involves 2 big meetings a year and reviewing all of the annual reports from each of the colleges, along with their responses, and reviewing any of the site team reports that happen to come up. Colleges, have to go through accreditation and reaccreditation, maximum of every 7 or 8 years. And so it is actually a tremendous amount of work. Excuse me. You have to be good at keeping things confidential, and you have to be able to look at the profession as a whole. You can't, do things that would favor your college, for example, necessarily. So,
but without breaking confidentialities and talking about the council for a minute, I mean, they provide a tremendous role to our profession. And we're talking about accrediting not only the colleges, schools and colleges, but they do the accreditation process for residencies. They do the continuing medical education. Truly unsung workhorses within the profession.
Yeah, that's the Council on Podiatric Medical Education. The full council accredits all that, certainly. And it is a tremendous amount of work. And remember, we're volunteers. We don't receive any, payment for that, other than we get to go to Bethesda, fairly often to Bethesda, Maryland, which is a nice town, to have most of our meetings.
As you well know, Dr. Violent is part of your accreditation team, and she works with me at Arizona. And I know she's always busy. She's always looking at residency programs, or flying to Bethesda for a couple days, or being offered opportunities to go and do reviews of other colleges and schools. So you're right. I mean, it's volunteer and it's a lot of work. And my hat's off to Heather Stagliano and her team at CPME. They do a phenomenal job. And of course, all the volunteers within our profession that get involved and make our profession better. I thank you for doing that also.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So Eric, quick question. Share something about you that nobody on this audience would know.
Nobody would know?
Well, within reason, right?
Well, I'm pretty boring, actually, but let's see. I started off this is my second career.
Okay. Oh, I did not know that.
My first career was as a technical writer. And what do may you ask, what does a technical writer do? Technical writers, at least in my world, wrote the instruction manuals that accompany computer software, computers. That's what I focused on.
Wow.
Pretty exciting stuff. Yeah, that's what I did for 4 years, actually. And I got into that because I studied electrical engineering in college, but ended up with a degree in communications. But I did both. And one of the faculty started a company in San Diego, in Sorrento Valley, and recruited most of the employees from college, University of California at San Diego. Asked if I wanted the job as a technical writer. And I didn't really know what that was, but I said, sure. Cause I was able, I knew I was a pretty good writer and I had the computer background. And I said, sure. Because prior to that, I was, working in a pizza place. And so suddenly I was making real money. I was a senior at college at the time. So I never had a job like that. And it was a lot of fun.
So I'm just thinking to myself, that's a huge leap from being a technical writer into entering the California College of Podiatric Medicine. What happened there in the interim? How were you exposed to podiatry?
So I had another long story. I worked for a few different companies. My first company, I was laid off. after about a year or so. I survived the first round of layoffs and then the second round. You know how technology companies go through cycles, hiring and then layoffs. So I got hired by a second one. Then I decided, this was also in San Diego, and I decided I want to move back to the Bay Area. So I did, and I got a job with Hewlett Packard in Cupertino. And I'd worked there about 6 months, and I was living in Marin County, and I was driving to Cupertino. And back in those days, it was the 80s. It was a quick drive. I could make it in an hour, which I guess you'd have to be in the Bay Area saying, what? How can that be? Well, you're thinking now, but back in the 80s, the freeways were wide open and you could go, and you could go fast. And I was driving to work one day and I said, my favorite part of the job is the commute. I said, I've got to get out of this. I don't like it. And I was telling a family friend about my troubles. I was complaining to her and I said, I always wanted to be a doctor, but my dad said, go into electrical engineering as a backup. And then once you kind of get into it, it's hard to get out of it. And she said to me, do you ever think of podiatry? And I said, podiatry, what's that? I was thinking, I didn't know what it was. Well, it turns out she had just got a job at the admissions department at the California College of Podiatric Medicine. Her name was Giselle Malinowski.
Okay.
And Giselle said, why don't you come on by? I'll give you a tour and you can, and so I did. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. You get to be a doctor, but you get the focus. And I loved having that focus. And I liked the lifestyle, the flexibility. My dad was a vascular surgeon. And growing up, he took call every third night for decades. And I never, I hardly saw him. And when I did see him, he was, be quiet. He's got to read his journals. He'd come home and read his, the journals. And then he'd get called at all hours. And it's like, oh my God, what a life. I mean, it's just so difficult from, the kid's perspective. And I didn't want that. But I like being a doctor. I like helping people. And anyway, podiatry just seemed perfect. And I told my dad, he said, he was very encouraging. He said, well, why don't you go visit with a couple of my podiatry friends? So I spent half a day with Mark Drucker and Harry Levac each.
Oh my gosh, good.
And I said, this is it. I'm doing it.
Wow, that's fabulous. So as a technical writer, had you taken all the organic chemistry and biology and physics and things?
Well, some. So I was electrical engineering, computer science major initially anyway at UCSD. So I had taken the chemistry and the physics. I didn't have any biology. So I had to go back to school and take biology. I did it at San Francisco State as a post-bac. And I also redid my chemistry because I wasn't happy with my chemistry knowledge. Okay. So I did that at San Francisco State and UC Berkeley. So it took me 2 years to get through all that, took the MCAT, and then applied. So I entered in 1989.
So your story brings up some, questions that are relevant today. I mean, how many times do we interview students for the different schools and colleges of podiatric medicine who say, I don't want to be an MD. I want to focus. I like podiatry. I want to be a surgeon. I like sports medicine, et cetera. And then they end up realizing that it's a different application process completely. And then they come into our schools and they say, well, gosh, someday I want to have a good work-life balance. I mean, that is exhibited in your experience with your father being a vascular surgeon. So what do you tell students today, Eric, when they ask you, I want to be a podiatrist, tell me about the work-life balance? What do you tell them?
It's flexible. I don't know any podiatrists who are very successful who don't work a lot. So you still can work a lot, but it's on your terms. If you want to work 7 days a week and take call in the emergency department, do it. You can do it. But if you want to work, 3 or 4 days a week and still make a good living, and you can do that too. It's really up to you. You still have to work hard.
Absolutely.
It's not med school light. It's hard work, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. A lot of the work-life balance things come after you've gone through school, after you've done residency, once you establish yourself, and then you've got options going forward. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. So that brings me to a topic that we haven't talked about yet. And, being such an incredible profession, podiatric medicine has been so good to us and so many of our colleagues. Why are we seeing application dip the last few years? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's troublesome. I think most people know these days what a podiatrist is, who a podiatrist is. I don't think they understand the scope of what we can do. Because we get to do so many things, and they don't understand it really is a fun job. I spend my time teaching, but I still work a half day a week at Kaiser Permanente nearby here. And I love it. It's not like work to me. It's like kind of a vacation, seeing my patients and solving problems and making people feel better. And the awareness of that is lacking. And it is a big commitment for me. For example, I did my 4-year degree, then I had to go back and do post-bac work to catch up, to fill in what I didn't have. And then 4 years of podiatric medical school. And then at my time, it was a 2-year residency. Now it's a 3-year residency. And now a lot of graduates also do a fellowship. So it's a long haul. The return on investment is really delayed quite a bit. Whereas now it didn't exist when I was a student, but PA, 2 years of work and you get to do a lot of things, but it's not the same control. I like to be the boss, and I like to make decisions and be responsible for the whole thing.
That's a great
I like to be the buck stops here kind of a person. I'd like to learn things in depth. And you might not get that. I don't know much about, being a PA, so I don't want to
it's interesting.
Step on anyone's toes, so to speak.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because there's a lot of professions that you go to school, it's a shorter period of time, there's no residency commitment, and then you start at a high salary. But that does come with its limitations, especially when it comes to autonomy, as you discussed. So I always think that's an interesting comment, because when I was the dean at Barry University, I was overseeing the College of Podiatric Medicine, but also the PA program. And we had 1,800 applicants for 60 positions for the PA roles. So there's a lot, that delayed gratification is real. You have to have the personality that is willing to deal with that. Whereas the immediate instant gratification of getting a degree and getting a job is very appealing for many students.
Yeah. And I was always the kid, like, you can have the candy bar now, but if you wait, 6 hours, you can have 2 candy bars. I was the kid who would wait 6 hours.
There you go. And there's really not a ceiling when you're in medicine and you're calling the shots and you've got options. So I tell our students that all the time. There's lots of options in healthcare. Podiatric medicine to me represents just a tremendous opportunity for people that want to work hard. To quote one of the presidents of APMA, he said, "I know a lot of orthopedic surgeons and they're making $500,000 a year, but all of them are working like crazy. They work day and night." And that's true for podiatry also, very similar type situation.
Absolutely.
All right. So shifting gears, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me?
Oh, to ask you? Well, let's see. Can I ask 2?
You may ask 2.
So getting this podcast started, what led you to do that?
A couple things. One is we have so many great people in the podiatric profession, and there's so many things that go on behind the scenes. And having started a residency program and seeing how much work that we put into it, think of the countless residency directors around the country and the clerkship directors and the faculty in residencies. That segment alone really doesn't have much of a voice. And then I look at all the colleges and schools, and there's 11 now. And I thought, our practitioners and students and prospective students, they don't know that much about our profession, because I continually interview students and they always say, "Well, I didn't know anything about podiatry till I was treated by a podiatrist, or my mom or dad was treated by a podiatrist." And I thought maybe if we did a podcast and we put the leaders in the profession on, highlighted organizations like CPME or AACP, the American Association of Colleges of Podiatric Medicine, or ABPM or ACFAS. We've got so many great organizations with tremendous people that run them. I wanted to give them a voice and give them an outlet so that they can share their experience about being a podiatrist and being part of this great profession. So that was kind of the motivation for starting it.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, thank you for doing it. I'm glad, one of my fellow deans did such a thing. It's fantastic. And I think it would be great for the profession. My second question is something you told me maybe a year or two ago, it's hard to tell, but you mentioned that you are expert in shotguns. And I might have more about that.
I might have mentioned that I was into shotguns. I don't know about the expert part, but I will tell you, I've been competing in shotgun sports, namely sporting clays and variation of sporting clays for probably going on 15 years now. And everybody's got to have something to do, right? Some people golf, some people ski. And when I was a child or a young kid, my dad used to shoot skeet and trap. And, it's kind of hard to get those kind of things out of your system if you were doing them when you were a kid. So I started competing probably in 2008 or so. And I've had just tremendous opportunities to travel around the world. I've shot world championship events in Spain and Portugal and Italy and Hungary and England and France, all over the place. So it's kind of my thing. And so thanks for asking. I mean, I've only won one big event. It was the US Open in 2017. And it was in my concurrent, right? A veteran for those of us that are older. But I enjoy doing it. I've met so many good friends. And it's like any sport that you get into. You get to know more about it, and the more you know, the less you know. So you get deeper into it, and next thing you know, you're traveling and shooting tournaments around the country. So, thank you for asking. I just got back from Florida 2 weeks ago, and in a couple of weeks, I'm off to South Carolina to do the same thing. So it's just like it's my version of relaxation and getting out and doing something other than work.
Okay, well, thank you for elaborating on that, and congratulations on your 2017 U.S. Open.
That's great.
Victory.
I remembered.
It's tremendous.
I wouldn't have mentioned it. So, anything else, Eric, that you'd like to share with us? I know we're running out of time, but any parting thoughts on your end?
Well, if there are any podiatrists out there listening, I have to, because of our recruitment crisis, I want to add to the voices out there that all it's going to take is for each podiatrist out there to mentor one potential applicant and send them to any podiatrist school. It doesn't have to be our institution. It could be anyone you're comfortable with, but that's what it would take to, flip this recruitment crisis that we're in right now. So that would be my parting words.
I echo the sentiments and I agree completely. We're such a wonderful profession. You'd like to see the applicant pool higher so that those opportunities are available to other students down the road. Well, I really, really appreciate your time, Eric, and sharing your knowledge and expertise. And thank you on behalf of the profession for all you do, being the dean in California. I know that's not an easy role, and a lot of different skill sets and a lot of balls in the air for all of us. So the fact that you have been so active with AACPM and CPME, my hat's off to you. Thank you so much.
Jeff, you're welcome. And thank you for your podcast and for all that you do as well.
Oh, thank you. So I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us on Dean's Chat today, and we will continue to bring you the voices of leaders and organizations within our profession. We'll see you next week, and don't forget to give us a 5-star rating, and cheers. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.